Uncle Sam wants a piece of the biggest wealth transfer. It's called redistribution of wealth. In this episode, I'm going to address inheriting money. Beware. Biden wants up to 2/3 of that money. So my name's Doug Andrew, and I've helped people optimize their financial assets and actually minimize unnecessary taxes for more than 47 years now. And in helping many people, fortunately, they have accumulated a lot of money. They've worked hard. I've worked with many people that are millionaires, multi-millionaires, and even billionaires. And I've noticed that when they work very hard, one of their goals, their dreams, is to be able to pass that down to their children and grandchildren. So I've helped them be able to do that and structure what I call a family bank. This is not a chartered bank like down the street. This is a conceptual bank, but we protect their wealth in financial instruments like my favorite, which I call the laser fund, and I'll talk about what that is at the end of this episode. But let's talk about this estate tax or inheritance tax. Now, they're actually a little bit different, but for the sake of simplicity, we're talking about the money that is left behind when both parents pass away. So let me give you a little bit of a history of what it's been in the past and what President Joe Biden has up his sleeve as far as changing the estate tax, because I've often quipped, a lot of times tax revenuers love to tax people who are 6 feet under because they can't complain about it. They're already gone. And their children just have to accept whatever they end up with net after being taxed on what their parents leave behind as an inheritance. So let's talk about the history here for just a few minutes. Now, before going into the history, let me just say, if you can think of anybody who could really benefit from this education, as I teach you, be sure to share, post a comment, like, but more than anything, subscribe to this channel. And at the end, I want to gift you a free copy of my most recent best-selling book as a thank you for engaging with me. So this thing that we call an inheritance tax or estate tax, simply put, is when you have, let's say, a father and a mother, a patriarch and a matriarch in a family, and for a long time, if one of them passes away first, all of the assets usually pass to the other spouse, the surviving spouse, without any kind of tax, okay? It's when the second spouse passes away that you may have to look at paying an inheritance tax. But in the last few years, especially under the Trump administration, we haven't had to worry about that. But I'm going to go clear back to the 1980s and 1990s to give you a little bit of perspective on the history behind this. Because guess what happens? 9 months after your parents, both of them, pass away, you are technically supposed to file a Form 706 with the IRS. And this is the estate tax form, and you actually list everything that your parents owned, right down to their underwear, okay? Everything they owned. Their house, their jewelry, guns, all that stuff. So you list all of those things in order for the government to see if they should tax it. Now, back in the 1990s, government gave an exclusion, an exemption on $600,000. You could leave behind $600,000 without paying an inheritance tax or an estate tax. But anything over $600,000, the tax started out at 37%. And if your assets were worth, 4 or 5 million back then, it would top out at 55%. So the government wanted a little over a third up to a little over a half of all of that money. And then some states also will assess an inheritance tax. Long story short, that was gradually increasing by $25,000 a year until about the turn of the century, 2000. And so it ended up being $1 million. So then you only had to pay a tax on what you inherited on anything over and above what was worth $1 million. And again, it would start out at 37% and top out around 55%. Well, what happened is under President George Bush in 2001 and 2003, he began to raise that exemption to $1.5 million, $2 million, and so forth. Now, from then, 20 years later, during the Trump administration, that exemption between a husband and wife is around $23.5 million. So a lot of people don't have that much money they leave behind. Now, a lot of very successful people do, and so they still have to deal with the estate tax or the inheritance tax. And so there's ways to solve that, and I've helped many wealthy people avoid paying as much as possible of unnecessary estate tax, and there's ways to do that. But it hasn't been a big issue, but Joe Biden may want to change that because he wants to redistribute the wealth. A lot of times tax revenuers who are hungry for tax revenue, they look towards taxing money as it changes hands. When people sell assets, when they liquidate their investments, when they retire, when they spend it, okay, and they earn it. I mean, Uncle Sam is there with his hand out. And so when they need tax revenue to fund a lot of the expensive initiatives that Congress comes up with, they go to the estate tax. So this is what is being proposed, and it hasn't passed yet, but you need to be aware of this. So here we go. So currently on estates valued between a husband and wife that are left behind 2 children in excess of about $23.5 million, everything over and above that is taxed, let's say around a 40% range. So to simplify this, what President Biden is proposing is that gets raised up to 67%, nearly 70%. Now, if you take a tax rate from 40% up to 67%, if you do the math, that's more than a 50% increase, right? See, 50% of 40 would be 20, 20 on top of 40 is 60. So this is more than a 50% increase. That's actually pretty huge. But there's something else that I'm really concerned about is not only raising the actual tax, in other words, my heavens, Uncle Sam is going to be standing there with his hand out upon your fathers and mothers passing, saying, I want up to 2/3. And you may be thinking, oh, I'm okay. My parents aren't leaving behind any more than $23.5 million. Don't hold your breath. I'm really concerned that he wants to lower the exemption or the threshold. Down to what? I don't know. But Hillary Clinton, when she was running, if she would have been elected in 2016, it sounded like she wanted to lower it back down to $1 million. So that anything left behind more than $1 million, starting out at maybe a 35-40% rate and then go up to 67%. I don't know, because she didn't get elected. But that's what she sort of had proposed. Now, President Biden may lower the threshold down to 10 million, 5 million. I don't know, but I would not be surprised if he doesn't lower it, and he may even go clear down to $1 million. Because the government loves to be there when there is money being moved or transferred. Whether you sell property or anything, if you haven't noticed, that's when revenuers want to be there at the title company. When you sell a property and you have a capital gain, they want to charge you a capital gain tax, which is usually at least 60% just taxed on inflation. Well, if it goes down to $1 million, it wouldn't surprise me because many states still have an estate tax or an inheritance tax assessed on everything left behind when people die over $1 million. So a state may charge another 10% on top of that. And there are states that do that. And so he may say, well, since some states charge 5 or 10% on everything over $1 million, maybe we'll lower the exemption clear down to $1 million again. This is going to be huge. And again, if you've kept your ear to the ground, a lot of tax revenuers say the best time to redistribute wealth is when the people who created it aren't around anymore. So again, the children didn't build it. So they should be grateful if they only get 1/3. And they should give 2/3 of it back to the government, and the government will redistribute it to other people. That's called redistribution of wealth. And we're going to see the largest transfer of wealth in American history here in the next 10 to 20 years because of the wealth that has been created by baby boomers And as they begin to pass away, we will have never seen this much wealth transfer to the next generation. So this is where tax revenuers are saying, we want 2/3 of that. What can you do to protect yourself? So depending upon your situation, I've helped many high net worth people avoid paying unnecessary tax. And I'm a red-blooded American. I think we should all pay our fair share. But if you've worked really hard and you would rather leave behind that wealth to a charity or a church or an organization, you want to allocate it to causes that you believe in, whether it be the Cancer Society or whatever, or to your children for their college education, for religious service, for military service, or whatever. This is what a lot of my clients, they want that money to be set aside in what I call a family bank. In my favorite instrument, which I call the laser fund, that will continue to grow at an average rate of return in the 8 to 10% range tax-free. So that every $1 million that is preserved in the family can generate $100,000 a year of cash that's tax-free that can help those in your family or the Cancer Society or the Kidney Foundation, the Red Cross, whoever, the Boy Scouts of America, whoever you want to help. But it's your choice who gets the money rather than the government taking it and determining how they're going to redistribute it. A lot of people like to maintain that choice and control. And so they will choose to put a lot of that money into what we call the laser fund. Now, the laser fund is a maximum funded tax advantaged insurance contract where you're taking the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with, and you're putting in the most money the IRS allows as fast as they allow, and it turns into this tax-free cash cow where I have earned net internal rates of return of 8, 9.6, 10.07% rates of return for the last 45 years. I use it for living benefits, but it does have a death benefit. So every $1 million that I may have, let's say, in a portfolio of laser funds, because I diversify, when I finally die, blossoms to $2.5 million if I were to die right now. People say, whoa, how much does that cost? And I go, well, nothing's free, but it doesn't cost me anything. But if I have $1 million, let's say, and it's generating $100,000 a year tax-free while I'm alive, and then my wife and I pass away, and it blossoms to $2.5 million instantly in a death benefit and transfers tax-free, then it is not included for income tax, but it could be added to the estate tax. But if I leave behind $2.5 million and they grab 2/3 of that, at least the remaining third is more than our children would have ever had I left behind just $1 million and Uncle Sam takes $670,000 of that. Does that make sense? So this is a way to be able to leave behind something and have the government, if they get real greedy with estate tax, inheritance tax, they'll get their portion, but your children will not be disinherited out of 67% of what you wanted to leave them. Maybe they'll end up with 80 or 90 or 100% of what you wanted to leave them. If this is intriguing you, you need to read this book. I'll tell you what, this isn't about selling you a book. You can pay $20 for it, but I'll gift you one free. If you go to laserfund.com, L-A-S-E-R, fund.com, or click below here, you contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling, and I'll pay for the book. I'll send it out to you, and this is actually 2 books in one. This white one has all the charts and graphs, 200 pages, 14 chapters. But when you flip it over to this one, this is 12 chapters, 100 pages, and there's a chapter in here specifically dedicated to what I'm talking about with estates, okay? And why the laser fund is like the dream solution for many goals while you're alive, but when you finally pass away, if you want to maximize what you leave behind tax-free to your heirs, consider a laser fund. When you read this, you'll understand why. So contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that. I'll fire out a copy to you, and if you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's also options for you to do that when you visit laserfund.com.